If there is no struggle, there can be no progress. Frederick Douglass, who was born 3/5 of a person, according to the United States Constitution, said that. If there is no struggle, there can be no progress. Frederick Douglass's name was there, high above Kamala Harris, as she spoke today in front of Frederick Douglass Memorial Hall on the campus of Howard University. Frederick Douglass, like many slaves, never knew when he was born, but took February 14th as his birthday because he remembered his mother calling him her little Valentine. Frederick Douglass lived 20 years a slave and then escaped. His books and his lectures became some of the most important public proofs that slaveholders, including presidents of the United States, were wrong in insisting that slaves were intellectually inferior to their owners. Frederick Douglass would be so proud and admiring of Kamala Harris. He did not just fight for the right to vote for black men when only white men could vote. He also fought for the right to vote for all women. When he was editor of the newspaper The North Star, Frederick Douglass wrote, "We hold woman to be justly entitled to all we claim for man." That was a very unpopular opinion among white men in this country at that time, and it remains an unpopular opinion among some white men in this country to this day. It may be that not enough people in this country yet believe in the full equality of women to elect a woman president of the United States. Frederick Douglass would have seen the election of Kamala Harris to vice president of the United States 4 years ago as real progress. Frederick Douglass knew that progress did not mean the end of struggle. And so, tonight, the peaceful transfer of power is underway. It began today, as it always has in the past, except once, with the concession speech, a speech in which Kamala Harris urged her supporters, as Frederick Douglass would have, as she put it, don't ever give up. To an audience full of tears, Kamala Harris thanked all of the campaign workers and volunteers who were there and the 90,000 Harris campaign volunteers around the country who knocked on doors for her, worked phone banks for her, sent letters for her. And although those 90,000 volunteers were always working for her, working for Kamala Harris and her candidacy, they all knew that they were working for a better future for this country. They all decided that for them, voting wasn't enough. 90,000 Americans decided to do more than just vote this time. And for that, the vice president said today that she is full of gratitude. The fight for our country is always worth it, she said. It is always worth it. And in an echo of Frederick Douglass, Kamala Harris said, she is full of resolve. Frederick Douglass was full of resolve every day of his life. The vice president knew that her supporters, as she put it, were experiencing a range of emotions right now. But who could possibly be feeling more emotion about what happened in this election than Kamala Harris? She didn't ask her supporters today for help with her range of emotions. She didn't cry, but her husband fought back tears. Doug Emhoff, who became a model of ethics in Washington by quitting his job as a high-powered lawyer to take a much lower-paying job as a law professor to make sure there could never be an appearance of conflict of interest with the vice president's work, brought a humanity and decency to his role as second gentleman that we can only hope is a guide for other spouses and relatives of politicians. The weight that Doug Emhoff had to bear while his wife was being publicly attacked and insulted in very personal terms, in very demeaning terms during the campaign. is a weight that we can only imagine. And for every minute of it, Doug Emhoff bore the weight and the pressure of the campaign with a dignity and grace that too many men have yet to learn. Speaking directly to the young people who were watching, Kamala Harris said it's okay to feel sad and disappointed. And she gave them this order, quote, "Don't you ever listen when anyone tells you something is impossible because it has never been done before." Knowing that many people feel we are entering a dark time, the vice president urged everyone to fill the sky with the light of a billion stars, the light of optimism. Frederick Douglass wrote, "The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." Your endurance is about to be tested 167 years after Frederick Douglass said, "The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." It's our turn, and we are not alone. We know how to do this. We've done it before. We endured those 4 years once before, and we resisted every day of those disgraceful Trump years in the White House. The 107 days of campaigning for president ended for Kamala Harris on the steps of Frederick Douglass Memorial Hall in a 12-minute speech that became the last word of her presidential campaign.
On the campaign, I would often say, when we fight, we win. But here's the thing. Sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. That doesn't mean we won't win. The important thing is don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop trying to make the world a better place. You have power. You have power. And don't you ever listen when anyone tells you something is impossible because it has never been done before. You have the capacity to do extraordinary good in the world. And so to everyone who is watching, do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves. This is a time to organize, to mobilize, and to stay engaged for the sake of freedom and justice and the future that we all know we can build together. Look, many of you know I started out as a prosecutor, and throughout my career, I saw people at some of the worst times in their lives. People who had suffered great harm and great pain, and yet found within themselves the strength and the courage and the resolve to take the stand, to take a stand, to fight for justice, to fight for themselves, to fight for others. So let their courage be our inspiration. Let their determination be our charge. And I'll close with this. There's an adage an historian once called a law of history, true of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all, I hope that is not the case. But here's the thing, America, if it is, let us fill the sky with the light of a brilliant, brilliant billion of stars. The light the light of optimism, of faith, of truth, and service. HU. And may that work guide us, even in the face of setbacks, toward the extraordinary promise of the United States of America. I thank you all. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. I thank you all.